It's raining and we're in front of Ginza Kimuraya, a very interesting piece of history in Ginza in Tokyo. Let's go check it out. You can technically eat at Kimuraya on the second floor, but you have to buy a drink, and a drink costs around 700 to 800 yen. So that's why we decided to come to the park and eat, and it's great because there's a lot of benches and a lot of seats, and the view is really, really nice, and it's free. Just about 5 or 10 minutes walk from the bakery. Kimuraya is the oldest bakery in Japan, which produces a very famous red bean bread, ANPAN. So let's try out what we bought. This one is the original Sakura ANPAN. It's got red bean and some Sakura flour jam in it, maybe? It's a pickled Sakura, and I believe they hand-pick the Sakura petals. That's a bit extra, but let's give it a go. Cheers! You can definitely taste the salt of the Sakura. That red bean is so smooth. It looks quite chunky, but it's not. No. The bread is quite firm. What I'm surprised about with the bread is that it's super soft. You can see it squishes beneath my fingers. But at the same time, it's quite firm. Like, you have to chew a little bit for it. Altogether makes a very interesting texture. It's not bad at all. I really like the texture. Overall, it's not as sweet as I thought it would be. The more you eat it, the more amazing it gets, especially as it's the first red bean bread in existence. The dab of Sakura in the middle, honestly, it's quite surprising. It is like a salty pickle, but it blends quite well and it mellows out the overall sweetness. It has a distinct floral flavor, but it goes so well with the red bean. Really delicious. Next we have the Ichiji Zu. So she said it was a jam, kind of strawberry jam I suppose, but we'll try it out. Cheers! Cheers! What is that? It's a kind of jam, that's for sure. It might be fig. There's a lot of small seeds. It's a very mild flavor, almost to the point where it's not sweet. It's fragrant and floral and very smooth, but it's a very light flavor and definitely not nearly as sweet as any jam I've had before. Even though it's very, very full, it's not overpowering. It's not like cloying or like it makes your teeth hurt. And the texture is really nice. I like this one a lot. So Kimuraya is very, very interesting. It has a very interesting history. Because we know that bread is probably not very traditional in terms of Japanese food. Like, they predominantly ate rice in terms of carbohydrates, right? But around the late 1800s, when westernization was starting to happen, more Western foods were becoming popular. And because there was sort of like a modernization of Japan at the late 1800s, even all the way back then, a lot of samurais, and yes, it does start with samurais, very interesting. They started to lose their jobs because no one had really any purpose for them. So this one samurai called Ginza Kimuraya, he lost his job and he was kind of chucked into one of the trades that were kind of arising because of the westernization. One of the jobs that he happened to get was being a baker. And at that time in Japan, bread was not very good. It was like salty and sour, and probably the texture wasn't very good at all. He, obviously, as a Japanese guy, was not very satisfied with the texture of it, right? So he was like, I'm gonna see if I can find a better way to make bread. And so he realized that the problem was with the fermentation of the yeast. Because you couldn't find bread yeast in Japan. And bread yeast is, you know, what makes it rise and what makes it fluffy. Yeah, he tried to experiment using different kinds of leavening agents, and he even tried using bear hops at one stage. And I mean, intuitively that makes sense because bear also uses yeast as a fermenting starter, but that made the bread dense and it wasn't very good at all. But then he realized that one of the Japanese sweets called sake manju actually uses a yeast leavening agent called sakadane, which is derived from rice and is what they use to make sake, rice wine. He experimented with that and it worked basically. You got bread which rose, and he did a very quintessentially Japanese thing, which was fill it with red bean, put a sakura leaf on top, bake it, and then sell it. And it was really popular. And that's what he called ANPAN, which is short for anko, which is red bean, and pan, derived from the French word for bread. Pan. Interestingly though, sakadane is actually the same yeast that they use for bread and for beer. It's Saccharomyces cerevisiae, but it's just a different strain, and that's why you get a completely different texture and flavor from it. It's not the sort of light, super fluffy bread. It's just slightly different. So after Mr. Kimura succeeded with making his ANPAN, he brought his bakery over to the Ginza area in Tokyo, and it is still the original bakery, although obviously they've revamped it a little bit, and they still use exactly the same recipe from 150 years ago, from 1869 when they first made the bread. That's incredible because this is amazing bread. What makes Kimuraya special as well is that they still make the sakadane from scratch. So they still ferment the liquid yeast from rice. They polish the rice and they ferment it from there. Which means that because sometimes you don't get perfect yeast, it can take up to a week just to make the yeast starter for the bread. A lot of bread companies use a commercial yeast because when yeast grows, basically every generation is susceptible to mutations or genetic change, which means that it can change by the time you're on your third or fourth go of making bread. But because they use a new one each time, they have a scientific team behind them to make sure it doesn't stray too much from the original. And they also use sensory analysis to make sure that the bread stays consistent every single day. Let's try the next one. I don't know which bean that they use, but this one uses a different kind of bean. She said endomame. It's very green, and actually the smell is not that strong. Let's try it. It is quite beany. It tastes a bit greener, if you know what I mean. If you're familiar with white bean bread, it's very similar to that. It's very fragrant. I think it's a little sweeter than the ANPAN, and it's a bit more chunky. This one is the flavor of the month, the shio lemon, salt lemon, which I think is a trending flavor. Oh yeah, there's shelves and shelves of those products. Let's give it a go. It smells amazing. It smells like lemon. It's so fragrant. There's like lemon rind in here. You get a bit of bitter, a bit of sour, but not overwhelmingly sour and not overwhelmingly sweet either. It is incredibly fragrant. The predominant thing is the fragrance of the lemons, which is delightful. It's not all that salty. It's just salty enough to counteract the sweetness of the bean paste. Lemons and salt go really well together. This is unfortunate that this is a flavor of the month and not a reoccurring or a permanent bread, because I would recommend this one so much. Another bean. This one is black bean. It's the one that the store clerk recommended to us. It looks a little red. It does look like red bean, maybe mixed with black bean. I think it's red bean with like whole black beans inside. But let's see. Tastes beany. It's almost got a vague tofu-ish flavor. I think it is black bean, mashed black bean with more whole black beans in it. But since the whole black beans are cooked very long, they're not like hard. You almost don't notice it's there. No. I was a little worried because I don't like the texture of boiled peanuts or boiled beans. But yeah, this is tasty. I think this one is a little more sweet, but smoothness, flavor, fragrance, all really good. Just as good. It's delicious. It's the last one already. Anbata. So it's anko, the red bean, and butter. This one is invented for foreigners, basically. I believe that they use a slightly different bread, closer to a baguette. But why is it for foreigners? The butter? I think so. Maybe they're just associate butter with... Oh well. Okay. It's larger, a lot heavier, but still smells delightful. It smells more like Western bread, honestly.
It does. Like that baguette. Basically a baguette.
Let's try it. It's a whipped butter. The whipped butter and the bread combination really is like Western breakfast. Like a hotel breakfast, you know? The addition of anko is just a plus.
The anko really isn't that sweet at all. Like compared to the green bean and the black bean, this is very mildly sweet.
And I think this one is a lot more chunky. It's not quite as smooth, you can feel the texture.
The taste of butter is delicious. And the taste of the bread is delicious too. It's completely different. It's a little more crusty, a little more
chewy.
But yeah, delicious.
Since the butter is whipped, even though it looks like a lot, it's still very light. That's good. And I like that it's so much bigger. That was delicious.
Super good.
They have so many more other flavors of pan. There's like maybe 10 of them.
They have a lot of Western style breads as well. And they even sell things like baguettes, which we saw behind the counter.
They have sandwiches, they have pastries. So I think anything there would be really tasty.
But absolutely, definitely try the Sakura ANPAN. It's their classic, their original, and possibly my favorite out of the 6 breads that we tried.
Agreed. 6? 5? 5? 5? 5?
All the bread that we tried.
Hands down, I would recommend this bakery to eat. Not only is there an interesting history, they have a lot of good bread, and it's just a really nice atmosphere too.
It's delicious, and it's not too expensive at all. Anyway, as to where you can find this bakery, and all of the information that we mentioned, you can look at our article, which will be linked in the description below.
As to where we are now, follow us on Instagram at TwinspeakEatGo. We'll see you next time.
Definitely try.
Recommend.
Delicious.
Wonderful. Tasty.
Wow.
If you're thinking of going to Japan, we highly recommend getting a Japan Rail Pass for stress-free travel. Check out the description box below for our video guide on how to choose and use the best JR Pass for your travel style. By using our affiliate link, you help to support small creators like us to produce more content for you. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye!
Someone's getting married. Congratulations. I'm so happy for you. Cute.
And here we are yelling at them.